I'm Thomas Ward. I'm 64 years old, and 2 weeks ago, I stood in the November rain at Harold Brennan's graveside in Charleston, South Carolina. Harold was 87 when he died. I had cared for him for 12 years, ever since his wife Catherine passed, and he needed someone who understood what it meant to serve with honor. I'm a former Marine Corps medic. Harold was Navy. We spoke the same language, but before the cemetery workers had even filled in the grave, Harold's nephew Derek pulled me aside, handed me an envelope, and said, "You've got 72 hours to clear your things out of my uncle's house. That little arrangement you had? It's over. Consider this your severance." Inside the envelope was a check for $5,000. He smiled when he said it, the kind of smile that comes easy to men who've never had to fight for anything. Derek thought I was just a hired hand with a high school diploma and a bum knee from Fallujah. He thought he had it all figured out. I just folded the check, put it in my pocket, and said, "I understand." I walked to my truck in the rain and drove away from the cemetery while Derek stood there making phone calls, already planning what he'd do with the money. What Derek didn't know was that by the time he got back to the house that afternoon, I'd already made 3 calls of my own. And by Monday morning, he wouldn't be calling his real estate agent. He'd be calling a criminal defense attorney. But before I tell you exactly how I dismantled his entire scheme piece by piece, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And if you believe that loyalty is worth more than money, hit that subscribe button right now. The funeral had been small. Harold didn't have many people left. Most of his Navy buddies were gone. His wife's family had drifted away after she died. It was me, Derek, a handful of neighbors from our street on the peninsula, and Father Michael from Street Phillips Church. Harold had been a good Catholic his whole life, even when the church disappointed him. I'd met Harold 12 years ago through the VA. I was doing in-home care for veterans, trying to make ends meet after my discharge. The IED that took my hearing in my left ear and messed up my knee also took my career. At 52, I was starting over. Harold had just lost Catherine to ovarian cancer. He was lost, angry, drowning in a house too big for one person. "I don't need a damn babysitter," he'd said the first day I showed up. He was standing in his kitchen, in a bathrobe, at 2 in the afternoon, unshaven, the sink full of dishes. "Good," I'd said, "because I'm not a babysitter. I'm a medic. Your doctor says you need someone to manage your medications and make sure you're eating. I'm here to do that. Everything else is up to you." He'd looked at me for a long time. Then he'd noticed the Marine Corps tattoo on my forearm. "You serve? 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines. 2 tours. Navy," he'd said. "Korea. Incheon landing." That was it. We understood each other. For 12 years, I lived in the guest house behind Harold's main house on Trad Street. Beautiful old place, built in 1820, worth at least $2 million. Harold owned it outright, no mortgage. He also had investments. Pension, Social Security. The man had money, but you'd never know it. He drove a 2008 Honda Accord. He wore the same 3 cardigan sweaters. He gave more to charity than he spent on himself. We had a routine. I'd make breakfast at 7. We'd read the paper together. I'd manage his blood pressure medication, his cholesterol medication, his arthritis medication. We'd take a walk around White Point Garden if his hip was good. I'd make lunch. Afternoons, he'd nap, or we'd watch old movies. Dinner at 6. By 8, he'd be in bed. But we also talked. Hours and hours of talking. He told me about Catherine, about how they'd met at a USO dance in 1955. He told me about his regrets, about the son they'd lost to leukemia when he was only 6 years old. He told me about his work as a maritime attorney, about the cases he'd won, the clients he'd helped. And I told him about Fallujah, about the Marines I couldn't save, about coming home and feeling like a stranger in my own country. "You're not a stranger here," he'd said one night. We were sitting on the back porch drinking bourbon. "You're family, Thomas. The only family I've got left." 3 months ago, Harold had called me into his study. He looked older than usual, tired. "I need to talk to you about something," he said. "Sit down." I sat. "I've been to see Walter Morrison. You know him, my attorney." Harold pushed a manila folder across the desk. "I've updated my will. I want you to know what's in it before I'm gone, so there's no confusion. I opened the folder. Inside was a last will and testament, dated August 15th. It was straightforward. Harold was leaving me the guest house where I lived, free and clear. He was leaving me $400,000 from his investment accounts. The main house and the rest of the estate, roughly $2.8 million, was going to various charities. The VA, Street Phillips, the Charleston Maritime Museum. Harold, I can't accept this, I'd said. You can, and you will. His voice had that tone, the one that didn't allow argument. You've given me 12 years of your life, Thomas. You've been my friend when I had none. You've been my family. That guest house is yours. That money is yours. You've earned every cent of it, and I won't hear another word about it. I'd tried to argue, but he'd shut me down. Besides, he'd said, smiling a little, I'm leaving the bulk of it to people who need it more than you do. This way. I know you'll be taken care of, and I know the rest will do some good in this world. We'd shaken hands. I'd put the folder in my room and hadn't thought about it again. Harold was in good health. His doctor said he could easily make it to 95. But 2 weeks ago, on a Tuesday morning, I'd found Harold in his bed. He hadn't woken up, just gone, peacefully, in his sleep, the way he would have wanted. The coroner said it was heart failure. Natural causes. Harold was 87. It happens. Standing at the funeral, I wasn't thinking about the will. I was thinking about how quiet the house would be, how I'd never make him oatmeal again, how I'd never hear him laugh at Johnny Carson reruns, how I'd lost the closest thing I had to a father. That's when Derek had pulled me aside. Derek Brennan, Harold's nephew, his sister's son. Harold rarely talked about his sister. She'd married some finance guy in New York, moved away, and mostly forgot about Harold except when she needed money. She died 5 years ago. Derek had come to the funeral. He'd spent the whole time on his phone. Derek had visited Harold maybe 3 times in 12 years. Always around the holidays. Always with a story about needing an investment opportunity or a loan for a business venture. Harold would write him a check just to get him to leave. Derek's not a bad kid, Harold had said once. Just weak. His mother spoiled him. Thought money could replace character. It can't. Now Derek was standing in front of me at the cemetery, handing me severance pay like I was a janitor. I appreciate everything you did for Uncle Harold, Derek said. His suit probably cost more than I made in a month, but the estate is being settled, and I'm going to need the property vacant. I've already got a buyer lined up for the main house. 72 hours should be enough time for you to find a place, right? I looked at him. Rain was dripping off the brim of my cap. What about Harold's will? I said quietly. Derek smiled. Patronizing. Uncle Harold and I had several conversations over the last few months. He updated his will. Left everything to me. I'm his only living relative. After all, it's all very legal and proper. My attorney will be in touch if there are any questions. He patted my shoulder and walked away. I stood there for a moment, watching him get into a black Mercedes. Then I got into my 2012 F-150 and drove back to Trad Street. The house was quiet, empty. Harold's favorite chair was still positioned by the window where he liked to read. His reading glasses were on the side table. His cardigan was draped over the back of the chair. I sat down on the couch and pulled out my phone. First call. Morrison Law Offices. How may I direct your call? Walter Morrison, please. This is Thomas Ward. Walter Morrison had been Harold's attorney for 30 years. He was 68, sharp as a tack, and he'd been at the funeral. He'd shaken my hand and told me to call him first thing Monday morning. Thomas, Walter said when he picked up. I was hoping you'd call. We need to talk. Can you come to my office in an hour? I'll be there. Second call. I scrolled through my contacts to a name I hadn't called in years. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Hayes, retired, my former commanding officer. He'd gone into private security consulting after leaving the Corps. He owed me a favor. A big one, Tommy Ward, Hayes said when he answered. It's been a minute. How are you holding up? I need help, sir, I said. I think someone's trying to steal from a dead man, and I think that same someone might have killed him. There was a pause. Where are you? Charleston. I'll be on a flight tomorrow morning. Don't do anything until I get there. Third call. I pulled up my photos and scrolled back 6 weeks. There it was. A video I'd taken on Harold's iPad and sent to my phone. Harold sitting in his study, looking directly at the camera. Dated September 28th. Thomas, Harold said in the video. If you're watching this, I'm gone. And I want to make something very clear. My will, the real one, is with Walter Morrison, dated August 15th. If anyone shows up claiming I changed my mind, claiming I left everything to Derek or anyone else, they're lying. I made my wishes known to Walter. I made them known to you. I trust you to make sure they're honored. You're a good man, Thomas. Don't let anyone take what's yours. I'd forgotten about this video. Harold had made it one afternoon when he was feeling sentimental. Just in case, he'd said. Derek's been calling a lot lately, asking about money, asking about the will. Something feels off. I'd thought Harold was just being paranoid. Now I wasn't so sure. Walter Morrison's office was in a historic building on Broad Street. I'd been there a few times with Harold over the years. Walter's secretary, Mrs. Patterson, greeted me with sad eyes. I'm so sorry about Harold, she said. He was a wonderful man. He was, I said. Walter's office was lined with law books and maritime paintings. He stood when I came in, shook my hand firmly. Sit down, Thomas. We've got a problem. He pulled out a file. This morning, I received a call from an attorney in New York, fellow named Philip Chen, represents Derek Brennan. Chen informed me that Harold executed a new will 6 weeks ago, leaving his entire estate to Derek. He's sending over the documents. My chest tightened. Harold made his will with you in August. He told me himself. I know, and I witnessed it. I have the original here in my safe. Walter leaned back in his chair. Which means either Harold went to New York and executed a second will without telling me, which would be extremely unusual, or Derek has produced a forged document. Derek told me I had 72 hours to vacate the property. Walter's jaw tightened. He has no authority to do that. Not yet. Not until this is settled in probate court. And I can tell you right now, I'm going to challenge any will that wasn't executed in my presence. I pulled out my phone and showed him the video. Harold, clear as day, stating his intentions. Walter watched it twice. This is good, very good. But Thomas, I need to be straight with you. If Derek has a will that looks legitimate, with witnesses and notarization, this could get complicated. These things can drag on for months, even years. And during that time, you might not have access to the house or the funds Harold intended for you. I don't care about the money, I said, and I meant it. I care about honoring Harold's wishes. He didn't want Derek to have anything. He wanted his estate to help people who needed it. I know, and we're going to fight this. But I want you to be prepared. Derek's attorney is from a big firm. They have resources. This won't be easy. I thought about Hayes flying in tomorrow. I've got resources too. When I left Walter's office, I drove back to Trad Street. The main house felt wrong now, like a crime scene. I went to the guest house instead, the little 2-bedroom cottage where I'd lived for 12 years. My discharge papers were framed on the wall. My books, my photos from the Corps. This was home. I sat at my small kitchen table and tried to think. Derek had 72 hours, he'd said. That meant by Friday, he'd expect me gone. He'd probably show up with movers, ready to empty the place out. But something was bothering me. Harold's death, the coroner said, heart failure. Natural causes, but Harold had been in good health. His last checkup was clean. His heart was strong for an 87-year-old man. I pulled out my laptop and opened the folder where I kept Harold's medical records. As his caregiver, I maintained detailed logs. Every medication, every dosage, every doctor's appointment. It was part of my job. I scrolled back through the last 2 months. August, September, October, November. Everything looked normal until late October. On October 24th, I'd noted that Harold seemed more tired than usual. By October 27th, he was complaining of dizziness. On October 30th, He'd had an episode where his heart was racing. I'd called his doctor. The doctor had adjusted his medication. But that was strange. I looked at my notes. Harold's blood pressure medication had been changed. Not by his regular doctor, Dr. Patterson, but by a cardiologist I didn't recognize. Dr. Richard Volkov. I pulled up the prescription. It was for a higher dose of his blood pressure medication. Much higher. And it had been called into the pharmacy, not handed to us directly. I felt cold. I opened my browser and searched for Dr. Richard Volkov, Charleston, South Carolina. Nothing. No listings. No practice. No medical license registered in South Carolina. I searched Dr. Richard Volkov, New York. There he was, a cardiologist practicing in Manhattan, near Derek's office. My hands started shaking. I pulled up the pharmacy records. The prescription had been called in on October 23rd, the day after Derek had visited Harold. Derek had been in Charleston for a real estate conference. He'd stopped by to see Harold, stayed for maybe an hour. I'd made coffee. They'd talked in Harold's study with the door closed. I'd thought nothing of it. But the next day, this prescription had been called in, and Harold had started taking the new medication. I looked at the dosage again. It was 3 times what Harold should have been taking for his condition. For an 7-year-old man with Harold's medical history, that dosage could cause heart failure. I sat back, my mind racing. Derek had come to Charleston. Derek had somehow gotten prescription pads or called in a prescription using a fake doctor's name. Derek had deliberately given Harold medication that would kill him. And 2 weeks later, Harold was dead. I picked up my phone and called Hayes. I need you to bring someone with you tomorrow. Someone who knows about prescription fraud and medical malpractice. Because I think Derek didn't just forge a will. I think he murdered Harold to get the inheritance. Hayes was quiet for a moment. I'm bringing my whole team, Tommy. We'll get to the bottom of this. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Harold, taking those pills, trusting that his medication was correct, trusting that Derek, his own nephew, wouldn't hurt him. I thought about Harold's last days, how tired he'd been, how he'd said his chest hurt sometimes, how I'd held his hand and told him it was just old age, just his body slowing down. I should have known. I should have checked. I was a medic. I should have seen the signs of overdose. But I'd trusted the prescription. I'd trusted the system. And now Harold was dead. Friday morning, Hayes showed up with 2 people. The first was a woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, a forensic medical examiner. The second was a man named Marcus Webb, a former DEA agent who specialized in prescription drug fraud. We sat in my guest house, and I showed them everything. The prescription records, the fake doctor, the dosage, Harold's symptoms in the weeks before he died. Dr. Chen looked at the medications and went pale. This dosage would absolutely cause heart failure in a man of Harold's age and condition, especially combined with his other medications. This is essentially a lethal dose administered over 2 weeks. Can we prove it? I asked. We'd need to exhume the body, she said quietly. Test for elevated levels of the medication in his system. But yes, if the levels are as high as I suspect, we can prove this was not a natural death. Marcus was on his laptop typing furiously. This Dr. Volkov in New York. I'm pulling his records now, and I'm running the prescription against the DEA database. He paused. Here's something. Doctor. Volkov's prescription pads were reported stolen 3 months ago. He filed a police report in New York. Hayes looked at me. Tommy, we've got enough to go to the police, but I want to understand the full scope of what Derek's done. If he forged a will and he poisoned Harold, there's probably more. Can you get me into Harold's study? I want to go through his financial records. I had a key to the main house. We walked over together. Harold's study was exactly as he'd left it. His desk was organized, neat, files in labeled folders, his computer password protected, but I knew the password. Catherine 1955. Hayes sat down at the computer while Marcus and Dr. Chen started going through the file cabinets. An hour later, Hayes called me over. Look at this, he said, pointing at the screen. Harold's bank account. I'd never looked at it before. It wasn't my business. But now, scrolling through the last 6 months of transactions, I saw something strange. Monthly withdrawals. Always for exactly $10,000. Always on the first of the month. Always going to an account labeled DCB Consulting. DCB, I said. Derek Charles Brennan. $10,000 a month for 6 months, Hayes said. That's $60,000. What was this for? I had no idea. Harold had never mentioned paying Derek for anything. Marcus pulled a folder from the filing cabinet. Found something. Invoices from DCB Consulting. They're charging Harold for financial advisory services. I looked at the invoices. They were on professional letterhead. They detailed hours worked, services rendered, advice given on investments and estate planning. Harold didn't need financial advice, I said. He had his own attorney. He had his own financial advisor at Merrill Lynch. This is fake. It's more than fake, Hayes said. It's embezzlement. Derek was billing his own uncle for services he never provided, and Harold was paying, probably because Derek convinced him it was legitimate. The picture was getting clearer. Derek had been systematically stealing from Harold for months. Then, when he found out Harold had cut him out of the will, he'd decided to take more drastic action. Dr. Chen spoke up from across the room. I found Harold's medication log, the one Thomas kept. It's meticulous. Every pill is accounted for. And look at this. She showed us the log. The prescription for the elevated blood pressure medication was filled on October 24th. But according to Thomas's notes, Harold never saw Dr. Volkov. He never had an appointment. This prescription appeared out of nowhere. Derek called it in, I said, using stolen prescription pads. Exactly, Marcus said. And I'll bet if we pull the pharmacy surveillance footage, we'll see Derek picking up the prescription, not Thomas. Hayes stood up. We're taking this to the police. Now. Tommy, call Walter Morrison. Tell him we need to file for an emergency exhumation order. Dr. Chen will testify that there's probable cause to believe Harold died from medication poisoning. And the will? I asked. We'll deal with that next. First, we prove Derek killed Harold. Once we do that, he can't inherit anything. South Carolina law prohibits anyone from profiting from a crime they committed. Everything moved fast after that. Hayes and Marcus went to the Charleston Police Department. Dr. Chen prepared her affidavit. Walter Morrison filed the emergency motion for exhumation. By Monday morning, there were police officers at the house. Detective Williams, a woman in her 40s, with sharp eyes, introduced herself. Mr. Ward, we've reviewed the evidence your associates provided. We've obtained a warrant to exhume Mr. Brennan's body for autopsy. We've also issued a warrant for Derek Brennan's bank records and phone records. And we'd like to ask you some questions. I told her everything. About the prescription. About the fake invoices. About the will. About Derek's visit in October. Where is Mr. Brennan now? Detective Williams asked. I don't know. Probably back in New York. Not anymore, another officer said, walking in. We've got eyes on him. He's at the Charleston Place Hotel. Checked in yesterday. Looks like he's planning to stay through the week. Detective Williams smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. Good. Let's go have a conversation with him. I wasn't allowed to be there when they arrested Derek. Hayes called me with the details. Derek had been in his hotel room, on the phone with a real estate agent, discussing offers for Harold's house. When the police knocked, he'd answered the door with confidence. That confidence lasted about 30 seconds. Detective Williams had presented the warrant, explained the investigation, asked Derek to come to the station for questioning. Derek had tried to play it cool. I'm happy to cooperate, Detective, but I should call my attorney first. That's your right, Mr. Brennan. But I should inform you that we have evidence suggesting you fraudulently prescribed medication to your uncle that led to his death. You're not under arrest yet, but that could change very quickly depending on what we find. According to Hayes, that's when Derek's face had gone white. At the station, Derek's attorney, Philip Chen, showed up within the hour. Big firm, expensive suit, very confident. Until Detective Williams laid out the evidence. The fake prescription from the stolen pads. The pharmacy record showing Derek had picked up the medication himself, not me. The financial records showing $60,000 in fraudulent billing. The video testimony from Harold stating his will was with Walter Morrison, and anyone claiming otherwise was lying. And then, the preliminary autopsy results. Harold's body had been exhumed on Tuesday. Dr. Chen had performed the autopsy personally on Wednesday morning. The blood work showed levels of blood pressure medication 5 times higher than therapeutic levels. Levels that would cause cardiac arrest in an elderly patient. Levels that could only have been achieved through deliberate overdose over a sustained period. Your client, Detective Williams said to Philip Chen, didn't just forge a will. He murdered his uncle to inherit money that was never going to be his. Philip Chen looked at Derek. Derek was sweating, his confidence gone. I want to make a deal, Derek said suddenly. I'll tell you everything. I'll plead guilty to the fraud, but the death was an accident. I didn't mean to kill him. I just wanted him to get sick enough that he'd be desperate, that he'd change the will. His attorney tried to stop him, but Derek kept talking. I needed the money. I have debts. I made bad investments. I thought Uncle Harold had millions just sitting there, and he was going to give it all away to charities, to strangers. I'm family. I deserved it. So you stole from him, Detective Williams said. I billed him for consulting. That's not stealing. He agreed to pay. He agreed because you manipulated him. And when that wasn't enough, you decided to kill him. No, I didn't want him to die. I just wanted him scared. Scared enough to change the will in my favor. Detective Williams leaned back. Mr. Brennan, you used a stolen prescription to administer a lethal dose of medication to an 7-year-old man over the course of 2 weeks. That's first-degree murder. Premeditated. You had multiple opportunities to stop. You chose not to. That's not an accident. Derek broke down then, started crying, saying it wasn't supposed to happen like this, saying he just wanted what was fair. But there's nothing fair about poisoning an old man who trusted you. The trial was scheduled for March, but in January, Derek's attorney came back to the DA with a plea deal. Derek would plead guilty to second-degree murder, wire fraud, and forgery. In exchange, the DA would recommend 25 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 20. Walter Morrison called me to ask what I thought. Harold would want justice, I said. But he wouldn't want this dragged out for years. If Derek serves 20 years, he'll be 62 when he gets out. That's justice enough. And the will? Walter asked. Honor Harold's wishes. The charities get their donations. I get the guest house. Everyone else can go to hell. The estate was settled in February. The VA received $500,000 to establish a program for caregivers of elderly veterans. Street Phillips received funds to maintain their historic building. The Charleston Maritime Museum got enough to create a permanent exhibit on Navy veterans of the Korean War, named after Harold. And I got the guest house, free and clear, and $400,000. I used $50,000 of it to establish the Harold Brennan Integrity Fund. It provides scholarships for young people who want to go into caregiving, nursing, or medicine. People who understand that service matters more than salary. The rest, I'm saving. Maybe I'll retire someday. Maybe I'll find another veteran who needs someone to talk to, someone who understands. I still live in the guest house on Trad Street. The main house was sold to a nice family from Atlanta. They have 3 kids who play in the yard where Harold used to sit and watch the birds. Sometimes I sit on the back porch with a bourbon, the way Harold and I used to, and I think about trust, about how easily it can be broken, about how some people see kindness as weakness. Derek saw an old man and a working-class caregiver. He saw people who wouldn't fight back. He saw easy money. He didn't see 12 years of loyalty. He didn't see a Marine who knew how to gather intelligence and build a case. He didn't see a network of people who owed me favors and would move heaven and earth to help me get justice. Most of all, he didn't see Harold's wisdom in choosing the right people to trust. Now I'm asking you, have you ever been underestimated by someone who only saw the surface? Have you ever had to fight for what was right against someone who thought they were smarter than you? Tell me your story in the comments below. Tell me where you're watching from. And if you believe that loyalty is worth more than money, please like this video and subscribe to Astral Vengeance. because justice always comes to those who wait.